Clay, here we are.
We're going?
Yep. We're starting, baby.
We're rolling?
We're rolling.
Wow.
How are you, man?
I'm doing fine. How are you?
We just get going. Just the jump start.
We're just going. We didn't have much of a, pre-conversation before this.
But we've had a pre-friendship.
We have. And this is a very good opportunity for me to see you face to face in the flesh.
We've had years of pre-friendship. That was the pre-conversation before the podcast.
Okay.
There you go.
Sounds good.
You're in the new space. Welcome. This is the first one. You're the first one to do it in the new space.
Oh, right. There's cameras here.
Here we go.
Beautiful. Good job on creating this.
Yeah, it's a work in progress. There's more to come, but it's at least a start.
Yeah. Looks great.
You know how, you're an artist. I think you get the social media rub. You can't just have a podcast. You have to have a good podcast and then be really good at social media if you want your podcast to grow.
And that's funny because I like podcasts because I can just stick them in my ear while I'm exercising because I do a ton of exercise.
Yeah.
So I like those going when
you ride a bike. That's mostly your exercise, right? You're a bike rider?
To and from work.
Oh, okay.
That's most of my exercise.
Do you listen to something that would freak me out?
I have the little over the ear. They're not in my ear.
Oh, okay.
So they're great for podcasts and audiobooks, but not great for listening to a complete album for the first time.
Yeah. Do you feel that rub of being an artist and having to be like really good at your thing and then also really good at the social media thing?
Well, I'm a social media expert first and an artist second.
Yeah, totally.
No, I guess you kind of forget what you are when you're on social media. You're like, well, I guess this thing that people are doing is what other people like, so I'll try it. And then it doesn't feel good. And then I just kind of stop posting things for a while because it seems so much like I'm trying to be in a generation that I'm not part of.
Yeah, totally. I feel that way every time I go on TikTok.
Yeah, I just generally feel like I'm 70 years old.
Yeah.
Even though I'm...
You're kind of an old soul like that, though.
I am. And I have to actively fight against it, but it's a struggle not to be stuck in. Yeah. For me, I think it's 2016. I think the year that you get married, that's the year that a lot of people stop, just wear the same wardrobe for the rest of your life, have the same haircut for the rest of your life.
Yep.
Which I've had the same haircut since I was 20.
It's easy for you to have the same haircut.
Yeah, I think I'll just keep it going.
That was very much a video YouTube joke, not so much a podcast joke.
Well, I'm wearing a hat, so I'll leave the mystery
going.
The
mystery.
But people who don't know me can
Yeah.
assume.
No, it is. I love podcasts. I listen to podcasts or audiobooks almost exclusively. I don't listen to the radio really in the car or anything like that.
Yeah.
But it is weird that the podcasts that I find, it's because I've watched a 30-second clip on TikTok or on Instagram.
Yeah.
And so
that's true. So maybe
that's the reason I bought all these cameras.
Is this going to be in its full form on YouTube, or are you just going to take a snippet of it to have on
No, I think
Instagram and TikTok?
I think so. Yeah. The algorithms on these things are ridiculous. When you really get into it, they're like, you got to post 3 times a day. You got to all these things. I can't do that.
It seems like there are conflicting strategies as well. So
yeah,
I just kind of post when I want to now.
Yeah. But you've always been good at making videos. That's always been a big part of your process.
Yeah, for sure. I started when it was not common for people to have cameras and a way to edit video.
Yeah.
So back in the early 2000s when I was in high school and starting film school, it was rare just to be able to produce that stuff. And now it's just common language.
Was film the first love or was music the first love?
I think music.
When did you start playing?
I started singing with my brother, who started playing guitar when he was like in sixth grade. So I was in fourth grade. So I was like 9 or 10, I think, somewhere around there. And my voice hadn't changed yet.
Oh, nice.
It was still nice and high.
Was that Peter Brady? The Peter Brady story? You know the Brady Bunch? In the middle of a performance, his voice cracks and his voice changes.
I don't remember that episode.
You were a nice young soprano still.
I was, yes. I had a very high voice. So, and I found out that I could harmonize well above him and kind of have that laser range as a young soprano.
What was the style? Like, what music were you guys into at that time?
I mean, at that point, it was mainly church music that we would actually, that was simple enough for us to just play and sing. But as far as what we were listening to early on, my family didn't have a CD player until 1997, but we had tapes, but we just had a few tapes. And my uncle, who's a musician, made us this tape called the Travel Tape. And it had a lot of Elvis Presley and a lot of Roger Miller on it. And there are a few other artists from probably the late 50s and early to mid 60s that I don't remember. But I remember Elvis and Roger Miller. And then we also had another tape from the Horse Creek Band, which was just some random bluegrass band that was playing at Silver Dollar City. I don't know if you know about Silver Dollar City, but it's a theme park. It's like a folk themed theme park in Branson, Missouri.
It's like like amusement park, like rides and all that stuff.
Yeah, they got Buzzsaw Falls.
Nice.
I mean, I haven't been there since 2006, so
it's like a Knott's Berry Farm type of thing.
Yes. But but then you can go into like a random cabin and there's just an old dude telling stories in there.
Nice.
Or you can like make a doll out of a corn cob or an apple core.
Got it.
At least that's what you could do a few decades ago.
Nice.
I don't know if they're still. I hope they're still doing that.
Yeah. Did you learn on bass or did you learn on guitar, piano? I know bass is like your number one instrument now.
I guess so. I would say that now writing is my number one.
Yeah.
Singing is my number two. Bass is number three. And guitar is number four.
It's kind of hard to write on bass, though. Do you write on guitar?
I write on guitar. I play more guitar now. I don't, sadly, don't pick up the bass that much anymore. And I think it's from being exposed to other players who are just so proficient.
Yeah, for sure.
At bass, and it's a very easy instrument to learn, and a very hard instrument to master.
Yeah.
So I feel like I'm kind of somewhere in the middle, and I feel like there are so many songwriters who can just be okay or pretty good at guitar.
Oh, totally.
And that's enough to be a good songwriter.
Yeah.
And that's, I don't know, kind of where I sit currently, but
yeah,
I'm always trying to improve.
I always think about, I learned on guitar. That's why I first started, but I wish I had learned on piano. Do you ever feel that way?
Yeah.
Like writing is so much easier on piano. When you look at the piano and you start to learn music theory, you're like, oh, it's all laid out there.
Yeah.
Linear. The guitar is like so random to me, music theory wise, sometimes, where the piano is just laid out nicely.
When I think of like an interval, it's like I think of where my fingers would be on a fretboard,
right,
for that interval rather than on a keyboard. But I think I learned a few chords on guitar first, and as like a 11-year-old or something, I was like, this is kind of hard, to hold my hands like this, and my brother always does it, so I'll play bass. So it's just like it's easier, but also a little bit different.
Yeah.
And I think also at that kind of approaching puberty age, there's kind of an insecurity of like, I need to hold something
absolutely
in front of me.
I don't think that's a puberty thing. I still can't play.
Yeah,
I can't perform in front of people not holding something.
It may be a male thing as well.
Maybe. Yeah.
I think if I may not have learned to play anything if I didn't have that insecurity of feeling like I need to be doing something with my hands. I can't just stand here, or I can't move around or play tambourine or something.
Were you feeling like the nudge to write stuff that young, or when did you start writing stuff?
No, I didn't. I didn't really start writing songs until later in high school, and they were more kind of comedic songs to ask a girl to prom.
Oh, absolutely.
Or
totally.
And it was just like when GarageBand was new, and I had like a MIDI keyboard, and I would make these, awful kind of techno sounding songs, like to ask someone to prom, or like as a birthday song for a friend. So I think early on it was more to be funny.
Yeah.
And then it became a bit more serious in my 20s.
Yeah.
And most of my songs, I think, are pretty serious. There's a little bit of humor laced in.
Yeah.
I wouldn't call it comedy. But there's some humor in there, but some of me wants to get back into attempting to be funny.
Yeah. You mentioned film school. How did that come about? How did that happen?
Yeah. Why did that happen? I made a lot of movies like in high school for school projects, and then we would make music videos, and like I said, at that time in like the early mid 2000s, very few people had video camera, or a lot of people had video cameras, but very few people had a computer that could edit.
Right.
And my dad happened to get a Macintosh.
Nice.
I forget what they call it, but it had like the blue back.
Oh yeah, for sure. I know exactly which one you're talking about.
And I don't know how much RAM it had, but I think we got it with 8 gigabytes of total memory.
Nice.
So you could maybe get about 10 minutes of standard def video on there before it just started to crash. And then you would we wouldn't keep the projects on a drive. We would just export them to a DV tape, and then put it on then export it from a DV tape to a VHS.
Yeah.
So that was a very fun process as a kid. At one point I wanted to turn into a career, and then I studied screenwriting. And then after school, I think I realized to be a screenwriter, you're basically just by yourself writing all the time. You may have a separate job, and then maybe 1 out of 20 screenplays, could potentially make it. And before that happens, in the traditional sense of Hollywood, you have to go through multiple layers before someone decides to hire hundreds of people, and in many cases spend millions of dollars before your screenplay actually becomes a film that people see.
Right.
And kind of around the time of getting out of film school, I started writing with my writing and singing partner from the Show Ponies, Andy, as well as Jason, who is our producer and guitar player.
You guys all met at film school?
No, I was in choir.
Oh, at Biola.
At Biola.
Yeah.
With Jason. And Jason's the connector between all of the band members. He introduced all of us.
Got it.
Where was I going with
So
this?
they were at Biola. They just were in different programs.
I was in the film program. Jason was in the music program.
Got it.
I had not met Phil or Kevin.
Yeah.
Who were also in the music program. I didn't meet them until after I'd graduated. And then Andy was kind of an outlier in that community. She grew up with Jason in Houston.
Got it.
And I met her in Houston, and then she ended up moving to LA, totally unrelated to music or any of us.
Did you feel like choosing Biola? Did you feel like, oh, I'm going to California, it's close to Hollywood? Like, was there that vibe? Because Biola is like not that.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what I thought until I graduated, like living in La Mirada, California, which is in South LA County and is more like Orange County in many ways than LA.
Mm-hmm.
And I was on campus a lot.
Yeah.
And
little bubble.
Yeah. I didn't realize, people always talked about the Biola bubble.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize how much that was a thing until about the minute I graduated and moved to LA. I'm like, oh, this is I was not living in LA. I was just living on what felt like a 4-year church camp. Not to insult Biola in any ways, because I do think it's a great institution.
Yeah.
But I chose it because I had a church background.
Yeah, sure.
And felt comfortable with other Christian people, but unfortunately did not do a ton off campus in LA, which was, I think, a disservice to my career.
It's funny to me that Biola would have a video program and be so close to LA, but like they didn't expose you to LA.
Well,
you know what I mean?
I think it some of that falls on faculty and staff.
I don't mind talking crap about Biola. I'll do it.
Okay. I don't want to
just joking
to talk down, but I think some of it kind of came down to my choices and like what I was felt comfortable with.
Sure.
And it's like my internship ended up being with like a small Christian producer in Orange County. So, I mean, I think for a lot of people do choose internships in Hollywood, and mine happened to not be that.
Yeah. Sure.
Which I think is probably a lot of why I didn't end up making that a career.
Right.
At least to this point.
Let's talk about the Show Ponies, your band, and probably if you're listening to this or watching this right now and you've never heard the Show Ponies, like maybe pause, go to YouTube, listen to some music. Is there like give me like 3 songs that are the epitome of the Show of Ponies that you would want people to listen to before we keep going?
Well, what Spotify says is Gone and Kalamazoo. Okay. Those are 2 that Andy wrote and sings on.
Show Ponies, and then I think Gone, Show Ponies, Kalamazoo.
In the top 5, one that I wrote would be Whiskey and Wine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Start there and just go down the rabbit hole.
Yeah.
Because it's all fantastic. The end of Kalamazoo is my favorite thing that you guys have. And especially like live, I love the end of Kalamazoo so much.
Yeah, that's a good one.
So pause, go listen to those, then come back. So you guys met all at Biola, and what was the vibe? Let's just start this and see what happens.
Well, it started with just me and Andy, who she did not go to Biola. She's a few years younger than the rest of us. Mm-hmm. But I had met her in Houston, Texas, when I lived with Jason, and they were friends, and we found out that our voices sounded good together.
Yeah.
And I had recorded a song in the summer of 2009 or something like that, and she sang a supporting harmony with it. Then she moved to LA, I think in 2010, totally unrelated to music or any of the rest of us. But I contacted her and said, hey, let's write some music.
Yeah.
I know you've got some songs. I've got a few songs. Let's see what we can do. So we started writing music, and we recorded a performance video for a song called Up With the Sun.
Mm.
And it didn't go viral or anything, but it had a lot of positive interaction online. And I think at that point it felt like something that we could do and continue to get people to interact with positively. And Jason saw that video and he was kind of like, let's make an album. So we did a Indiegogo, and it was just kind of
Indiegogo, raising the money.
Yeah. We raised, I think 2/3 of the money on Indiegogo.
Yeah.
And, which was kind of barely enough to get to Austin, Texas, where we recorded and pay the engineer and get back. And then I think the mixing engineer in LA was like, I'll just do this. I'll mix it for you. Pay me when you can. And then someone's dad, a friend of my brother, I think we were still like $2,000 short of actually being able to finish everything up and get CDs made.
Yeah.
He's like, I'll just give you $2,000.
Nice.
No interest. Pay me back when you can.
Nice.
So that was the way we recorded our first album.
Yeah.
And through recording, we brought on Phil, who was a Biola alum that Jason knew. And he just did all the fiddle tracks in one day. And then we started playing live shows. And Jason brought on Kevin, who is a Biola alum. And we just kind of naturally said, well, we're a band. Let's keep doing this, the five of us.
Did it feel like, was there excitement right away? Did it feel like, wow, this was meant to be, this is really working? Or was it like something you guys had to work at to kind of gel together?
It felt pretty natural, I think. And when you're in your early 20s, you have that level of excitement and engagement and just kind of being able to drop anything spontaneously and get together and practice or go play a show.
Yeah.
So I think being young at that point was absolutely in our favor. I can't see something like, I mean, I'm still recording music, but now that everyone I'm playing with is gigging professionally and has families and mortgages and all of that, practices are planned weeks in advance.
Yeah. I mean, the style of music that it is, what do you, folk, Americana, how do you label?
Americana is the biggest blanket that can encompass other genres.
I mean, was it that from the beginning? Like, this is the kind of music we're going to do. Everyone was on board. I mean, finding, 5 people in LA that all play folk, Americana, whatever music.
When we recorded our first album, Here We Are, it was really like folk pop.
Mm-hmm.
And then we had Phil add fiddle tracks.
Yeah.
We didn't write the songs with fiddles in mind.
Yeah.
And then he played fiddle, I think, on every single song.
Mm-hmm.
And we're like, well, this sounds kind of bluegrassy now. There's already kind of a folk country tinge to it. Then we went not full bluegrass, but Jason learned to flat pick when Phil joined.
Yeah.
And bluegrass would be a pretty big section of what we were, but not fully bluegrass. So Americana covers a lot of things.
Yeah. So you guys start making albums, you start doing live shows. What was kind of the height of the Show Ponies?
We played a pretty big festival in 2016 called Floyd Fest in Floyd, Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we were on the road for, like 3 solid weeks on the East Coast and some of the Midwest. So I think that was probably, I don't know if you would call that the height, but when we were doing the most was in 2015 and 2016,
Mm-hmm.
being able to do East Coast tours. And
Like literally you had a van driving around playing different shows.
yeah,
Was that like living the life to you, or was it fun?
it was fun, but we were always on, or at least I was always on the fringe of like, am I going to be able to pay rent or, pay for food and, and clothing?
Yeah.
So financially, it was not the life by any means, which
Sure.
was a pretty big factor of why the band did not continue. But I mean, it was really what I wanted to do,
Yeah.
and just as much as playing music, I love going on road trips,
Yeah.
which is essentially what it was. It was just a
Yeah.
lot of long road trips with friends. And then at the end of the day, you get to play music,
Yeah.
and then you get up the next day and you're
Yeah.
you're on a road trip.
Well, I think when we were talking about social media earlier, but with all this technology that, lets you record at home and do all those things, I think
Mm-hmm.
the generation coming up has like no concept of that grind, that getting in a van and going venue to venue and playing to 12 people one night and 150 the next night. And you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think things are shifting somewhat, and people are interacting more now
Mm-hmm.
virtually in little spurts,
Yeah.
rather than kind of a longer cohesive story,
Yeah.
which an album would be a longer cohesive story rather than kind of a 30-second highlight of the song on Instagram or TikTok.
Yeah.
And-
Albums used to tell a story from start to finish.
Yeah.
The
And
songs were put together in a certain way on purpose.
people still listen to albums. I don't want to say that's
Yeah.
that longer form is dead,
Yeah.
because we're doing a podcast, which
Yeah.
is probably going to be somewhere around an hour.
Right.
That's much longer than a 30-second
Yeah.
TikTok video.
But I'm still going to have to cut it up into 30-second clips to put on TikTok.
Yeah, and I mean,
In hopes that someone goes and listens to the longer conversation.
yeah.
Yeah.
And, we have a lot of ways to try to get people to go off of a social media platform to
Yeah.
listen to a podcast or watch a music video or listen to a full album. So I don't think long form is dead.
Mm-hmm.
There are just a lot of other short form ways of getting people to the long form.
Yeah, sure.
To stop scrolling and listen and
Sure.
focus.
When did you start to sense that things were coming to an end with the Show Ponies? Or was it like sudden? Or did you feel it coming?
It was not sudden. I think we toured for maybe like 18 months, which was, not, I was glad that we were actually making money
Yeah.
on the road. But
How long was the band together, start to finish?
2011 to 2018.
Got it. Yeah. That's a long
So
chunk of time.
7 years.
Yeah.
So I think we had, after like 18 months of kind of grueling
Mm-hmm.
touring, where maybe you'll have a good show, but you have 5 shows that you're losing money
Right. Right.
at. So I think after we finally got a booking agency, I guess in 2015, which
Mhm.
made things easier. But there was a conversation, I think in 2015, of how long are we going to have this lifestyle? Like if this just continues to, if this is the peak, or this is a plateau,
Yeah.
how long are we going to acceptably be on
Right.
this plateau? I think we all had different answers of how long we were comfortable with that being our lives.
Yeah.
And then there were some family issues with one of our members, and those family issues ended up being more pressing than solving the financial issues.
Got it.
With
Yeah.
the band.
Yeah.
And I think that was the right decision. Like, there's not any part of me that thinks that we should have kept on going.
Yeah. If you had, if you had gone viral at some point, if the band would have exploded, would it still be together today, do you think?
I think there's a lot better chance that it would.
Yeah.
But I think what our vision of success going into it, or vision of it, at least viability going into it, the music industry was changing so much in the midst of everything. And in 2011, the idea was, you play as much as possible, then you'll eventually get in front of the right manager or producer or label.
Yeah.
And you'll reach some sort of critical mass where someone will recognize you.
Right.
And then they'll take you the rest of the way where this can be a comfortable life.
Right.
And that model of success is only works for a very small minority of big musicians. And there are a lot of middle class people that are able to do music outside of that model.
Right.
And I think if we had more of that strategic outlook of, we're going to be kind of middle class people that, likely are making less than $100,000 a year doing this.
Right.
But there are enough outlets outside of a big record label that we can piece together and make this work.
Right.
And I would say that's kind of a model that a lot of people are following, within the past decade.
Right.
But I think we had always hoped eventually we'll find a manager.
Right.
And not to say that the way that we did it wasn't strategic, but it wasn't the right strategy to ensure viability and longevity.
Right. Yeah. So now there's a documentary.
There is.
And
thanks for bringing that up.
Was the documentary to follow the Show Ponies, or was the documentary to follow the end of the Show Ponies? You know what I mean?
The documentary was, the crew followed us on our last West Coast,
knowing it was the
tour.
last one.
Knowing it was the last one.
Got it.
We were officially saying farewell to our fans.
Yeah.
I think the idea of the documentary is to kind of capture the emotion that surrounds, just in general, saying goodbye or putting something to bed forever.
Does it, because the documentary was finished after that whole process, did it feel like reopening a wound, or did it feel cathartic, or how did it feel when that actually was finished and you saw it?
I think seeing it for the first time was quite cathartic. And just realizing, like, when I was in the band, I always felt like this is going to be an extreme success, or this is going to be a failure that's going to ruin me forever. And my mind thought so much in those extremes for such a long time. And then seeing the documentary, I was like, well, this wasn't like a success where we were super famous and everyone knew where we were. It wasn't a complete failure. It was something that we were privileged to do for several years of our lives, and
Yeah.
It was great when it existed, and now life is different.
Yeah. Yeah. What's now for you? I know you've released some songs yourself on solo stuff. Is that the future for you? How do you want to move forward?
Yeah. I don't know if I've told you this story, but something very strange
Ooh.
happened. Well, let me go in reverse.
Yeah, do
How
it.
much time? Where are we good?
No,
on
we're
time?
good. Let's go.
So, during the pandemic, my wife and I, followed the rules pretty strictly. We did everything that we were supposed to. We masked. We
Sure.
didn't see family. My wife was completely Zoom school. She's a teacher, so
Yeah.
she was at home, and we kind of had the realization: why are we paying to live in LA when it doesn't matter? So we, like many people, had the idea we're gonna move, and we were planning to move to Arkansas,
Yeah.
which is where I'm from. So for almost maybe 9 months of our lives, we were trying really hard to just get out of California.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that was fueled by, like, the pandemic was not fun
Yeah.
for anyone.
Yeah.
I think a lot of that was fueled by trying to escape
Mm-hmm.
what we were in. And we spent 9 months trying to find jobs in in Arkansas,
Yeah.
and doors were just closing left and right. So we were like, okay, this isn't gonna happen. And when we came to that realization or made that decision, you reached out to me and said, hey, would you like to play music at the Pasadena location of Montrose Church
Yeah.
every week, which is a paying gig.
Yep.
I won't say how much, but
but it's a small church, so you can imagine it's millions.
It allows me to be part-time at my what was my primary gig at a bike shop.
Yeah.
And it allows me to sing and play and collaborate with other musicians on a weekly basis.
Yeah.
Which is great. So that happened. And then we randomly got the opportunity to move to a house in Pasadena. Wasn't really something that we were looking at doing. We were looking at moving out of the state.
Yeah.
And that house happens to be less than a mile from the church that I play at.
Yeah.
And about 2 miles from my wife's job and my primary job. And here's kind of the kicker of what I'm getting to when you ask about music. I decided I have to play a show. I'm just going to, and I booked a gig at a little coffee shop a mile from my house just to say, I got to do this. Let's see who shows up. Played the show. It's like, okay, that was fine. 35 of primarily my friends showed up, and I did it. I need to figure out how to.
Is the one where
this.
It's the stage in the back of the coffee shop?
Yeah, the coffee gallery
backstage. Yeah, that's a cool spot. I've seen you there, but it was a couple years ago.
Yeah.
I didn't go to the recent one, but I saw you there a couple years ago, I remember.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool
It's
spot.
a cool spot. Yeah.
I like it. Did that show, and I was just like, okay, well, I'm happy where I'm at in life right now. You know, it's not what I dreamed of in my early years, but I'm pretty content. And if this is what I do, this is fine.
Yeah.
This is good. I'm happy. I have my family. I have my friends. I paying the bills. I'm not worried about that.
Yeah.
And then after that show, like the next week, someone that was there, I have to keep their identity secret.
Oh, secret story. Hey.
Someone that I knew, a friend of mine,
Mm-hmm.
they approached me and said, what are your plans with music? And I essentially said, just to kind of be happy where I'm at right now.
Yeah.
I'd like something to happen, but I don't really have the money to record. Think I'll just try to find another show and be happy playing at church and not make it an idol in my life like I had done for many years. And he said, well, I'd like to pay for your next album.
Okay.
I'm like, I accept.
Wow.
And he said, here's an amount of money.
Yeah.
The only stipulation is you can do whatever you want with it creatively, but you can't buy a car or you can't do anything.
He
like
gave
that.
Like straight up gave you the money.
Not that
Like
day.
it's
but
sitting
he's
in
like,
a bank account.
It's sitting in a bank account.
No
right
way.
now. So, had things gone according to our plan, which was to just get out of the state of California and just have our jobs or whatever, that would not have happened. And I'm very grateful that it did. So for the past several months, I've been continuing to write for my next.
That's exciting.
Album. Yeah.
Is it different writing knowing that you have all this money sitting in a bank account?
I don't know. Writing is just so much like, typically I just sit down and either have writer's block or write a song that, you end up not liking, and then you end up using 10% of what you write. So I don't know if it's changed writing that much, but it's changed my perspective in that typically the things that I plan for don't work out the way that I want them to, but they work out the way that they're supposed to. And I don't know how much you want to get into the faith aspect.
No, I mean, it's about time. It's about time in the course of this podcast to dive into those sorts of things.
Yeah.
So, I mean, why not?
Yeah. So I'll record an album hopefully within the next couple months.
Nice.
And then I'm doing a little screening tour of the Show Ponies documentary, where I'll be playing in Washington, which is where the production company is. We're playing in Seattle, Wenatchee, and Prosser.
Cool.
Then we'll do a premiere down in LA at some point this spring. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm doing with music right now, and then I'll record and release an album at some point.
That is very cool.
This year, so.
And if anyone listening right now wants to give me a bunch of money to do something, contact me.
Yeah, it was just like it was totally
incredible.
random when that.
Am I ever going to find out who it is, or is it literally like they wanted to be anonymous?
I think they'll remain anonymous.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, you don't know this person.
I don't know him. No, it's not somebody in our circles.
You've not met
this
person.
Got it.
Yeah.
Because I want to meet that person really bad.
This was someone who I'd always known as a generous person, and I didn't know exactly what their financial standing was, but it was a complete surprise and shock.
That's awesome. Let's talk about faith stuff. God, spirituality.
Yeah.
What did you grow up in? Did you grow up in Christian family?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
My grandfather was a pastor.
Oh, okay.
And was the vice president of the Southern Baptist home missions board.
Oh, okay.
So faith was very much my background.
Mm-hmm.
I know this podcast is about like deconstruction or being
No,
honest with doubts.
I guess it's about honesty in general. It's not necessarily deconstruction. It's just about where you're at and how you see everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that if you deconstruct your faith, you're removing certain elements and saying, if this isn't there, is God still?
Mm-hmm.
Is he still present if we remove this?
Yeah.
And I think what I've found my relationship with God to be is that he removes certain things in my life and says, is this what you're all about? Or do you believe in me?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's really what my relationship with God has been as an adult.
Mm-hmm.
And to be honest with you, it hasn't necessarily been having faith in the moment. A lot of my journey has been looking back and saying, oh, God really provided and did something amazing. I wish it hadn't been so anxious in that moment or in those years. I wish I just would have known that he was working in the moment.
Yeah. Are you better at that now? Do you feel like?
A little bit.
You feel it a little bit,
not much
differently now.
So I'm working.
Yeah.
I'm working on it. So as Americans and modern people, it's kind of our default to look at God and say, well, how can God help me with what I'm doing? How can he help me with my career? How can he help me with my finances, with my relationships, and
the spiritual vending machine type of thing? Yeah. And
if he doesn't, well, let's just get rid of him, or let's be angry with him. Let's restructure things. I don't think that's what God does at all. And if you look at a lot of the figures of the Bible, a lot of them, their lives don't turn out that well.
Yeah.
Especially the apostles.
Yeah, they're all crucified except for John.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I think for me, a relationship with God has not really been an assurance or a comfort. It's been a constant removal of idols in my life to see him more clearly.
Yeah.
And it hasn't really been a confirmation of certain church doctrines. It's, kind of, I think it's interesting that in the Bible, a lot of people ask Jesus, how do I get to heaven? Mm-hmm. And his answers are typically cryptic.
Yeah.
Or he'll tell a story, or he'll present a challenge like, well, just sell everything. You're rich.
Yeah.
Get rid of everything and follow me.
Yeah.
And one of the rare times where he explicitly tells someone they have their salvation is the thief on the cross. Right next to him dying, and he says, I believe you're the Son of God.
Yeah.
And Jesus is basically like, yeah, you're in. So I think it's a relationship with him is constantly identifying, like, how am I good? How am I great? God's given me things. I'm thankful. I'm not ashamed, but think it's identifying more with the thief on the cross, to have that salvation, whatever that is, whether that's just a relationship here while I'm on earth, or whether it's an eternity in heaven.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that the faith that you were taught growing up, or is that stuff you've kind of learned along the way?
I think in some ways it was the faith that I was taught, but just the culture that we're in and that most people are in, it's like, how do you improve yourself? How do you build more wealth for yourself?
Yeah.
And if that's not what you're doing, you're doing something wrong.
Yeah.
So that's absolutely not, that's kind of pervasive in just general culture and sneaks in to Christian culture. And I would say that that's definitely snuck into my faith. Like, God, I'm not where I want to be financially. I'm not where I want to be professionally.
Right.
What am I doing wrong so you can serve me in that way?
Yeah. No, that's such a big thing to think about that's in our culture, is that the idea that if something physically, meaning money or health or something, is going wrong, like, what did I do to God for this to happen? It's such a pervasive thing in our culture, I think, that we really need to get rid of. Like, the idea that we're pleasing or displeasing God, and then therefore our wealth, our finances, or whatever are not working.
Yeah.
I don't think that that's really how God works.
I don't think so.
Yeah. But it's a hard thing to not equate the two, right? I mean, just like the way that we do prayer life in America so much is praying for the things we want, praying for the things we want to have happen. And then if God in our minds does or doesn't deliver on that, then you have to figure out a reason of why he wouldn't deliver on that.
Yeah.
Just the overall thought of that's how God works is, it gets sticky real fast.
And I think that's kind of our default mindset, and the default mindset of so many people for some reason, but that's not really, I don't think, how God works. Especially if you look at people in Scripture. He blesses people in so many ways, but he's also present in the suffering and hardship and injustice that exists in this world.
Are there things that you believed when you were younger that you don't necessarily believe anymore? And I guess I say that in the context also of, I think we're similar, that we kind of grew up in Christian households and then went to Christian bubble schools, mine being Biola's rival, Azusa Pacific.
Yeah.
But, when you're kind of in those bubbles and then you break out of it, you can start to learn new things or rethink some things. Are there things that happen to your faith?
Not really, like, specific doctrines. I think I grew up being very afraid of going to hell.
Yeah.
And I grew up, wanting to save people.
Yeah.
Wanting to be a missionary or a evangelical in that way, because I didn't want people to go to hell.
Yeah.
I think my view on that has changed in some ways. I do think that hell exists, but probably not in the sense of the kind of classic guys with pitchforks and flames and stuff.
Some kind of separation from God.
Some sort of separation from God, which I mean is awful.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that. Sorry, I lost my train of thought.
No, it's all good.
You're gonna have to
I mean, some kind of some kind of hell exists, some kind of separation from God. I think what's hard is as I start to learn more about our brain function and DNA and all those things that are precursors to how we think and how we act and all that stuff, I find it really hard to think that ultimately, if that is the case, that grace wouldn't cover all of it.
Yeah.
That like there's something that we can do physically on this earth that would be too far away from grace to say, you know what I mean? I mean, even like the worst of the worst. I would certainly
like to believe that.
Yeah.
Ultimately don't know what the case is going to be after we're not on this earth anymore. But I mean, I think if I get to heaven, it's solely going to be because of God's grace and not based on anything.
Yeah. It's just hard to think that if I think of like the worst of the worst, right? If I'm going to label people as like, that's probably hell.
Yeah.
If I was born into that same context with that same brain, with that same, would I have not made the same choices? You know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
We're so wired to do certain things and be certain ways that it's just really hard for me to fathom that grace won't cover all of that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I certainly hope that it will. And we think about those people who are more sinful than us or who do awful things. I think that rather than separate ourselves into a little different, more holy group, we have to look at their heart and know that my heart's really no different.
Yeah.
I'm no better than you. And God doesn't love me more than he loves you.
Which to me is not what the church in America is saying right now at all. Like, I feel like a lot of the church in America is like digging in trenches and getting ready to fight because we have the moral high ground, or you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I mean the church in America. I don't feel like you and I or even Montrose Church is really part of that, but the church as a whole as it presents.
I have to look at other religious people and say like, oh, they're doing such awful stuff and their heart is in the wrong place.
Sure.
And I have to look at their heart as well and say like, well, I'm no better than you.
I get that. To me, the thing from Rob Bell stuck in my mind, and paraphrasing, he says, the Bible says, at the end, every knee will bow and every tongue will confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, right? Like, and then he sends him to hell. You know what I mean? Like, that just doesn't seem like, to me, like the way that it's going to happen, and I've gotten a lot of pushback on this podcast for saying that before, but that's just where my brain is. I can't imagine what we're doing right now leading towards that end.
Yeah.
But it's
tough.
Don't
know. I'd like to believe that, and then like at the end of the day, like what I believe doesn't change what reality is.
Yeah.
My beliefs can potentially change the outcome of my life, or achieving some sort of a goal or something like that, but they don't alter reality.
I do wish that it was, to me, I wish it was more clear if that's the case, if there's like a way to get in and a way to get out. Like you said, Jesus was like often pretty vague about the instructions of how to do it.
Yeah.
Like, even if you take John 3:16, like the biggest verse ever, like, if you believe in me, like, what does that mean? Like, belief in something is so fragile. It's not like a concrete instruction to me. You know what I mean? Like, I if that's how it is, I wish that Jesus would have been, here's the 5-step bullet point list of what you need to do.
Mm-hmm.
And then he would just been talking like that forever. Like he would have been like, guys, you don't understand. Eternity's on the line. Do these 5 things. I don't really see that. And that makes it hard for me to reconcile. Like, what do I do to get in? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And I think I'm less concerned right now, like with who's in and who's out. 'Cause somehow God is love. God loves everybody.
Yeah.
I don't think he loves people in the church any more than he loves people outside of the church.
Yeah.
I think believing in him gives you the opportunity to have a relationship with God while you're here on earth.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's like just you suddenly become a card carrying member. And I don't necessarily think that once you do believe in him, then your life's going to go the way that you want it to. It's probably going to be something completely different. And
yeah. I mean, not to get corny, but it's what you're saying is very much like the footprints in the sand thing, that you've gone through times where you've been anxious, you've been worried about things, and then now you look back on it and go, oh, maybe I shouldn't have been as anxious and worried as I should have been.
And I think if you live in the Spirit, God gives you the ability to choose if you're going to see him and cherish him in the moment, because every single time I've been anxious or thought that God or the world is against me, well, I can look back and say, oh, he was there. But somehow that's very difficult for me to do in the present. I wish it weren't. I'm working on it.
Awesome. Well, dude, thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah.
The first one with cameras.
Oh yeah.
You'll always be the first.
Uh-oh. I forgot that there were cameras here.
How can people follow along with what you're doing with the doc, with new stuff you're writing? What's the best ways for people to follow along?
The best thing is always going to be to get on my email list.
Okay.
If you go to claytonchaney.com, hit contact, and that'll take you to my email list, or scroll to the bottom of the page, or follow me on Instagram, Clay Chaney. Or if you're interested in the doc or the previous band, follow the Show Ponies.
Awesome.
On Instagram.
I highly recommend checking out that music. It's so good. I still listen to it all the time.
Thank you.
Dude, thanks for doing this, man.
Yeah, my pleasure.